Hello, everybody. Good morning. Thank you for joining us. This is a comprehensive guide to ANSI and ISEA Z358.1, 2014, and emergency shower and eye wash compliance. Thank you very much for being here. We greatly appreciate it. We're going to go over a lot of great information today, and hopefully let you leave with some tools that will help you with your own compliance and knowledge when it comes to emergency eye wash and shower safety equipment. I want to quickly remind everybody before we get going here and get onto today's topics and introductions and stuff that if you have questions at any point during the presentation, please feel free to submit them into the questions bar there using the questions section on the control panel. This will, I'll get to these after the webinar as quickly as I can. We'll have a Q&A section and we'll just get through as many as we possibly can live on the webinar. Otherwise, post-webinar, we'll be sending out an email, a follow-up email with an Excel spreadsheet that had all of your questions, all of my answers, and that way you have the benefit of everybody's questions and maybe some of the things that you didn't think about yourself and the answers to those questions. So we'll be following up with that follow-up email, and I have lots of other great stuff for you in there too. This webinar is going to be recorded, and that recording will be available to you. The follow-up email will go out about 24 to 48 hours after this presentation. I have to have time to, again, answer those questions, put everything together, get the recording ready, and send the links and everything out to you guys. So we're also going to be launching poll questions. They'll be launched throughout the presentation. There's only 4, I believe. But these really help us to just improve our process here and to provide you with more resources that can help us to help you better. Also, another thing that's going to go out is a follow-up survey that'll be sent out after the webinar, and we'll give you a $5 Starbucks gift card. So coffee on us for participating in that follow-up survey. So I'll bribe you to do it because I want that feedback. I want to know whether you enjoyed it. If you didn't enjoy it, all of that is helpful to me and my team. My name is Justin Dunn. That is pre-COVID Justin Dunn right there. That's a much nicer picture than what's sitting in front of this computer screen right now. But I'm the product specialist and trainer for Haas. With me and making sure everything goes smoothly in the background here is Nicole Dennison, our marketing manager. Nicole, did you want to say hi real quick?
Hey, good morning. Yes, thanks, Justin. Actually, I want to quickly, I'm getting a couple of notes. Can somebody please chat, write a quick chat and let me know that you can hear. If you can hear this, please submit a yes in the chat box, please. You can hear. Okay, great. Okay, thanks, guys. I appreciate that. I'm getting a couple people saying that they can't hear, so I'll just make a note to everybody that if you're not getting any sound to log out and log back in. I will be managing all the questions as they come through. So as Justin said, if you have any questions throughout the webinar, please send them my way and I will be happy to answer as many as I can. And then if we have time at the end, we will hit on them in the Q&A section. So thanks for that, Justin.
That made me nervous. I was like, nobody can hear. I wasted the good introduction.
Me too, but I'm glad I got a lot of people saying that they can hear, so that's great. Thanks, guys.
Okay, good. Thank you, everybody, for doing that. We appreciate it. Okay, so moving on here. Today's topics, what we're going to be covering here is what is the ANSI ISEA Z358.1 standard, the significant requirements of that standard, and talking a little bit about how to test for those individual requirements so that you can go forth and do those yourself in your own facility or pass on that knowledge. the best practices for emergency equipment, stuff that we've learned over the years, stuff that I've picked up myself over the years, having done worked in this field for about 6 years now. You pick up a lot of really great tips that you like to pass on. And then Q&A at the end with your submitted questions. And also, when this went out before, we asked for some for people to submit questions. So we have some of those too that I'll touch at the end of the webinar, as well as a quick FAQ, some of our frequently asked questions regarding Canada and hospitals and all kinds of different stuff. Okay, well let's get into this. So I really want to talk about the importance of compliance real quick. For everybody should pretty much know who OSHA is. If you're not familiar with OSHA, they're the Occupational Safety and Health Administration. And they are the agency responsible for regulating emergency shower and eyewash facilities. Their own standard is 29 CFR 1910.151C, and you can go look that up. It's under medical services and first aid. And all they give us is a paragraph, really, that says where the eyes or body of any person may be exposed to injurious corrosive materials, suitable facilities for quick drenching or flushing of the eyes and body need to be provided within the work area for immediate emergency use. And this doesn't give us a lot of information. This tells us that we have to have emergency equipment, that if there are injurious corrosive materials, that we have to have suitable facilities, but it doesn't tell us what suitable facilities are, how they have to function, where they need to go, etc. And that's where the ISEA and ANSI standard comes in. So what we're trying to do here through obviously promoting the use of the ANSI standard is preventing injuries and fatalities, lowering general workplace risk, lowering the lost time and money for both employee and employer, right? The employer is going to be out an employee. The employee is going to want to get back to work as quick as possible. They got a family they want to get back to and provide for, and having the correct emergency equipment and response to a specific hazard is vitally important to that. Emergency equipment is kind of weird in that way. You have to have it. Well, you certainly don't ever want to have to use it. It's probably going to be one of the worst days of your life, but when you do need it, we need to make sure that it works. Now OSHA, they've stepped up enforcement, particularly for employers who have a history of serious or repeated violations, serious and repeated violations being two of the most serious. On August 1st, 2016, OSHA fines increased for the first time since 1990, and that was by 80%. To account for inflation over the years. And also on effective January 2nd, 2018, just 2 years ago now, OSHA fines have increased an additional 2%, accounting for inflation year over year. So they're going to continue to grow. We shouldn't see a huge jump like 80% again, but with that 2% increase, they're increasing the fines year over year to account for inflation and ensure that we're not dealing with numbers from 30 years ago, the 1990s. Here's a couple examples. The scary slide. You see some pretty big numbers on this page. These are OSHA fines across the US. Some familiar names in there, but just to give you an example of a fine, over on the left-hand side here, we have $195,000 is the total penalty. This is in July 2017. This is all public information, by the way. You can go look this up through OSHA. But it was in Coos Bay, Oregon, through a Bay Area Athletic Club, and their violation was that the employees were working with extreme pH chemicals, not provided approved eyewash and/or shower stations there. And what they were dealing with was pool and the pH chemicals to balance the pool and things like that. But they didn't have any emergency equipment if somebody were exposed to those chemicals. And this is what we're looking at. So the penalties, they vary wildly, but forking over $200,000 for a penalty is a far cry from just investing, you know, $1,000 to $2,000 on a piece of emergency equipment and hiring a plumber to slap it in. You could save yourself a lot of heartbreak there. So what is the standard? It was written by the ISEA. They are the International Safety and Equipment Association. ANSI distributes that document, and what it does is it defines emergency eye wash and shower design, location, and temperature requirements for proper functionality and usage. OSHA references that ANSI standard. So they've not ever officially adopted it, but they do that a lot with standards, and because they have their own 1910.151C. But what they do is officially through their site and through their inspectors is tell you that if you want to comply with OSHA 1910.151C, you have to look at ANSI Z358.1. And that's why this document ends up being so important to us. So the ANSI standard, it was first published in 1981. It's been revised 5 times since in 1990, 98, 2004, 2009, and 2014. You can see just based on kind of the range of years there that they've made revisions to the standard that we can probably expect updated information from them within the next year or two. In 2009, some of the most important revisions included a temperature range for water delivery, simultaneous use, eye wash testing requirements, and also in 2014, some of the major revisions included the design, manufacture, and installation of emergency showers, the equipment installation location, which was missing before, and some adjusted measurements. A lot of this having to do with more the manufacturer and ensuring that we're all being consistent than the end user. Okay, with that, let's launch poll question number 1. Nicole, if you would please.
All right, thanks, Justin. The question is, which best describes your role in choosing showers and eye face washes? And we'll give everybody just a few seconds here to submit your answer. All right, we'll go ahead and lock it down here in just a second. Thanks, Justin.
No, thank you, Nicole. Okay, moving on from the poll question, let's get into the significant requirements, the bulk of our webinar today, and how to test for those requirements. Some of the testing is really simple, but I'll go over everything from A to Z here. So weekly testing versus annual inspection. Some people find this as news. This is new information, but weekly performance testing is required. The emergency equipment needs to be activated on a weekly basis. The activation needs to ensure that there's water flow to the heads of the devices, and that includes the eye washes and the safety shower. Whatever's in place. If there's a nozzle, an outlet of water, that has to be activated. Now, the duration of the activation needs to be sufficient to ensure that all of the stagnant water in the unit itself and in the sections of piping behind the unit, also known as the dead leg, gets cleared out. Now, that dead leg it can be all kinds of different lengths behind the unit. So that amount of time that you're going to have to run the unit is going to vary depending on how long that water or that supply line is, right? Because we need to get that cleared out. Otherwise, we're looking at things like Legionella and other growth and nasty bacteria building up in the pipe and eventually blocking it and things like that. I've turned on emergency equipment where the shower, shot out noodles before water, nasty bacteria and stuff coming out of there before water ever did. It's pretty nasty. I've seen every color of water coming out of this stuff, from Gatorade to oil. It's crazy. So now on weekly testing, that's for plumbed emergency equipment. When you have non-plumbed, self-contained emergency equipment that has a tank and its own store of water, what you get is, ooh, what is that? Nicole, are you on mute? Hit me for me real quick. But on the portable equipment, what you're going to want to do is open the tank, look inside, ensure that it has enough water to meet the manufacturer's requirements and to supply a full 15 minutes of water, and then you can close the tank back up. For a pressurized system, just check the pressure gauge. We need to ensure that the pressure gauge is meeting manufacturer's requirements, a certain PSI. I usually still wiggle the tank just to make sure there is actually that it is actually full of water. But that's all that's required. You do not have to actually activate self-contained portable equipment on a weekly basis. Otherwise, that creates maintenance ticket items and a lot more work for your maintenance team. On an annual basis, everything on the emergency equipment has to be tested and measured. One of the most difficult parts of that is a full 15-minute test of the emergency equipment, which can be difficult to manage. That's a lot of water that's going to come out of that equipment. If you got an eye face wash, you're talking, 45 gallons. If you've got a combination unit, both of those have to run. Now we're talking 360 gallons-ish, depending on what you're getting out of the equipment. That's got to go somewhere, and capturing that can be difficult, but there is equipment out there that can help you with that. Or luckily, if it's just outside or you have a drain nearby, just let it run. Some of the tools that you will need, that's our 9011 testing kit there on the right. That's what we like to provide. But you're going to need a tape measure. You're going to need an Eyewash gauge. Eyewash gauge, I'll go over here in a little bit, but it was defined by the ANSI standard. They gave us the drawings. They told us how to create this so that we can measure average human anthropometrics and human eye spacing to ensure that it's usable when you use the Eyewash or eye face wash. You're going to need a 5-gallon bucket, the 2-gallon water line marked, a shower sock and pole. Trust me, they call them drenched showers for a reason, and that will really help to control the flow and to capture it. You're going to need a thermometer, and you're going to need the ANSI Z358.1 checklist, which we can provide you and will provide you with, which is a very handy checklist that Nicole and I worked on ourselves, and will help you to get through this process and make sure that you check everything you need to check. Okay, to start, first and foremost, the equipment needs to be within 10 seconds or 55 feet from the hazard. It needs to be immediately accessible. Any further than that, and you really start to push it when it comes to your ability to recover and to the amount of damage that could potentially be caused by whatever it is that you've been exposed to, the hazardous substance. So if it was a corrosive or a caustic or even just dust in your eye, the longer you leave that in your, you have your eyeball moving around, the more likely it is that you're going to cause permanent damage. So this is a maximum distance. You can be immediately adjacent to the hazard so long as it's safe to do so. So if the hazard's going to spray and create a hazard in the area, well, then you're probably going to want to utilize that 55 feet, get the emergency equipment as far away from it as possible, up to that 55 feet to ensure that the person being treated is going to be safe from that hazard. But 55 feet is that maximum. The equipment needs to be located on the same level as the hazard. So no changes in level. So to confirm this, you're really just going to need to ensure that there are no stairs or floor changes, etc., between the equipment and the hazard. The equipment needs to be free of obstructions, so check for hoses, piping, toolboxes, anything that could be considered a tripping hazard or an obstruction that would keep you from getting to the emergency equipment. All of these pictures on the right-hand side here, these are real. These aren't staged or anything. Emergency equipment gets used, hopefully, so little other than testing. I mean, really, if you have an emergency, you're gonna hopefully have the right equipment in place, but ideally, we don't want you to ever have to actually use emergency equipment, right? We want it to sit there and get tested and never get used, but it's got to work right. And unfortunately, that emergency equipment eventually people stop testing and stuff starts piling up around it, and that's what we have to avoid, because someday somebody's going to need that and they're going to have to wrestle and go through an obstacle course to get to the emergency equipment to actually use it. So we got to make sure it's free of obstructions, free path. Next, it's got to be well lit, and it has to be easily identifiable with highly visible signage. Unfortunately, sometimes these go into dark, dingy corners of your facility. The signage has been in the sun too long and it's faded or cracked or broken on the ground. For instance, the one on the right here, there's no emergency signage, but that's an easy fix. We can easily add signage to whatever piece of equipment we need to add it to. It's easily retrofittable, so that's an easy one to fix. But just make sure you have the proper signage too. You don't have an Eyewash sign where there's a combination sign, or a combination sign where there's only an Eyewash sign. We don't want to set false expectations for what type of emergency equipment that you would like to access, right? If you're having an emergency, I need a shower and I need an Eyewash, and I get there, and that's what the sign said, and there's only a drench hose over here or something, that's what we want to avoid. The equipment needs to deliver flushing fluid for a full 15 minutes. That's pretty much the bare minimum when it comes to emergency flushing of your skin. If you look on the SDS sheet for just about any chemical, you're going to look in the first aid section, and it's going to tell you what it is that you need to do. You need to wash out your eyes, you need to rinse your skin, and it's going to tell you an amount of time, and that time at a bare minimum is 15 minutes. For more severe hazards and corrosives, caustics, other dangerous chemicals, if they get on your body, sometimes that time can go up quite a bit, depending on what you're dealing with, up to 30, even an hour, depending on what it is. And we want to make sure that that is being utilized, that full 15 minutes, because when paramedics arrive and they need to take you to the hospital, a lot of times they're going to ask, how long have you been in there? What does the SDS call for? And the first aid measures, because they need to know, one, what they're dealing with, two, if it is completely off of your skin. They don't want to remove you from that equipment and then take you to the hospital and find out it's still on you and still damaging you. That's going to cause a pretty horrible situation where you're going to continue to get damaged on your way to get cared for. So very important. The outlets need to be protected from airborne contaminants. That's just dust covers. We need to make sure the dust covers are in place. Any and all stored flushing fluid, or the outlets and nozzles and heads on a device. If it is a downward facing outlet, like a shower head or a faucet mounted device, no dust cover is needed, only if it's facing up. But we got to make sure dust covers are always in place. The dust covers also have to be self-removing. If you activate the equipment and then have to manually take the dust cover off of the equipment, that's non-compliant. It can't take extra steps. We want to be able to activate that equipment, the dust cover removes itself immediately, and we're getting flushing fluid. So activate the unit, just ensure that the dust covers are coming off without any additional steps or assistance. The equipment needs to go from off to on in 1 second or less, and it needs to remain on without the use of the operator's hands. Both of those are incredibly important. So to evaluate the activation, you're going to have to turn on the equipment. You have to make sure that immediately after activating the valve that we have water to the heads of the device in under 1 second, and that you don't have to use your hands to keep the equipment open. What used to be very popular were self-closing valves, and self-closing valves still show up here and there on emergency equipment, but they have to be stay open valves for all emergency equipment. Otherwise, if you can imagine for a second having to hold the eye face wash open, hold the shower open, you're removing clothing, you're holding your eyes open and things like that. I can rub my belly, I can pat my head. I don't know if I said that in the right order, but I can do that, but I can't do that and do all of this stuff at the same time. You have to have your hands free for this emergency. You have other things to deal with. So very important, they have to stay open. Now there is a minimum amount of water that has to be present at these devices for them to work correctly, and it's the bare minimum across the standard for each type of equipment. So on an Eyewash, you have to have a minimum of 0.4 gallons per minute. And that's because you have one stream of water each, one for each eye, and you're flushing them out. On an eye face wash, you have a minimum of 3 gallons per minute. And that's because you have the additional face wash capabilities, right? There's a lot more water coming out of it, and it's going to require more. And a drench shower is a combination of, or is a minimum of 20 gallons per minute. Now, across all of these, this is all a bare minimum amount of water. And at Haas, we really think utilizing the water as intelligently as possible is the smart way to go. So we try to stick as close as possible to these minimum amount of these minimum flow rates and utilize the water in a way that's smart and intelligent and is going to clean off the victim as quickly as possible without doing any damage, without doing any harm, right? If you have a corrosive, your skin is in poor shape. If you could imagine for a second what the feeling would be of 30 to 40 gallons per minute pumping out of a shower on top of you is going to feel like. So we really take into consideration victim comfort, and I'd like for you to as well. Consider what it's going to be like to be inside of that equipment, because I'm going to give you some examples here coming up of injurious flow rates and things like that we have to avoid per the ANSI standard. So, and here we go. So it has to provide a controlled flow of flushing fluid at a velocity that's low enough to be non-injurious to the user. And that's both for the shower and for the eye wash or eye face wash. And again, is ensuring that if you're going to use the equipment, that the water pressure isn't going to force you out of the equipment early, which can happen. Like I said, if you're already compromised, you're already in an immense amount of pain. Some people would rather deal with the hazard than they would, an excessive amount of water coming out of the eye wash. I like to call them brain washers. You get these eye washes that shoot like 20 feet in each direction, super strong streams. There's no way anybody's going to be able to put their face in that and have a comfortable experience, let alone not do damage to the sensitive tissue of your eyeballs and things like that. So confirm this just by testing the flow rate of the equipment and the flow pattern of the water coming out of that equipment is also incredibly important. So in this repeating video here, this is my buddy McDean here in the video, but you can see small droplets coming out of the shower head, evenly distributed, and then you have a gentle flushing experience with that eye face wash. I got some examples right here for you. So on the left, you have injurious flow. Injurious flow, there's too much water, they're not utilizing flow controls, and there's no way you're gonna stick your face in that. You'd almost rather deal with the stuff in your eyes than go through that. That's gonna hurt really badly. And remember, our eye wash flow rate is minimum 0.4 GPM, and our eye face wash a minimum of 3 GPM. 3 gallons per minute would be the minimum for these. These are both eye face washes. But on the left, we have too much, and on the right, we have the other situation. Choose which eye you want to save. This isn't enough water on the right here. It's starving. This can happen when the shower's activated too, or if the shower isn't activated in this photo and the shower is activated, it can go even lower than that because the shower needs 20 plus GPM. That's not going to be enough to sustain this eye face wash. So this isn't enough to wash both of your eyes or your face all at one time, and that's what we need to watch out for. Here's our eye wash gauge. That's our 9015. It's included in that test kit. But like I said, here's the drawing. This is straight from the ANSI standard. We took a little snippet of the picture, but they defined how it is that we were supposed to make this device. They told us that these are the measurements and this is how you use it, and that's what we followed. And probably In the future, they'll upgrade to an eye face wash gauge, since that's industry standard now is an eye face wash for most applications. But the flushing fluid coming out of the equipment, whether it's an eye wash or an eye face wash, the eye wash streams have to meet the areas between the interior and exterior of a gauge at some point less than 8 inches. And I'll show you how that's done. So this is the eye wash gauge. My buddy here is measuring to 8 inches above the eye wash or eye face wash nozzle. He's slowly lowering that gauge to meet the water, and he's testing that the eye wash streams specifically are meeting those eye circles on the gauge. And that can happen at any point under 8 inches. So emergency equipment across all manufacturers is built differently, and they don't all have the same spray patterns and types. So some of them, one I can think of, Speakman, they make a unit, I like to call it the ear wash, but there are 2 blades on either side, and it shoots water directly towards the middle of the bowl, and it's almost like a flat spray across it. And at that point, you'd be lowering that gauge, but it would meet like in the streams directly centered of both of those eye wash nozzles. So it can happen. So this is how you would use it. So here's a better view of it, because I really want to drive this home. You can see the eye wash streams meeting the eye circles on the gauge. I get so many questions about how to use this gauge. I just want to make sure I really drive it home. Measure 8 inches above it, start at 8 inches, lower it, and as long as it lines up, that's average human eye spacing. It means it's usable. Somebody's going to be able to approach it and utilize that equipment. But we don't actually, speaking of the eye wash gauge, we don't actually measure the amount of water coming out of an eye wash or eye face wash. We utilize the gauge. So as long as it's meeting gauge guidelines, it's meeting the correct GPM requirements, and it's usable. Just in case you were wondering, how do I measure the amount of water coming out of this thing? And you really can't, unless you have the drain hooked up and you can measure the amount of water that's coming out of it and you do the math. But otherwise, just utilize the eye wash gauge. Now, the flushing fluid that's coming out of the equipment needs to be arranged so that the flow pattern is, the top of the flow pattern is between 33 to 53 inches. So no greater than 53 inches and no less than 33 inches. And that's, again, just based on average human height. We're ensuring that the equipment is usable. When you stand at that equipment, you're going to be able to bend over, put your face above the equipment and utilize it correctly. Otherwise, if it's too tall, there are going to be people that can't use it. If it's too low, it's going to be incredibly difficult to use, and the shower flow pattern is going to be maybe too wide of a pattern and not flush you correctly the way it was designed. So the old standard was just a 45-inch maximum height measured to the head of the device, but that wasn't doing us any good. We need to measure the top of the water flow pattern. That's what's important. We also have to make sure there's a minimum 6-inch distance from the heads of the device and any obstructions. And that's just going to make sure that we don't hit our head on something when we go to utilize the equipment. And to measure this, you're going to need to take measure from the surface floor that the user is standing on, measure up to the top of the water streams. And then for the distance from the eye face wash heads from a wall or obstruction, again, just use a tape measure and check the distance for any obstructions. Piece of cake on that one. So just to remind you of the combined GPM requirements for an eye wash or a shower, or an eye face wash and shower: 20.4 GPM for a shower and eye wash, 23 GPM for a shower and eye face wash, because we have to consider the GPM requirements for both pieces of equipment. The one on the right here is a good example. You've got the eye wash isn't even on in this photo, but you don't have nearly enough water to meet the manufacturer's requirements for that shower head. It's also creating something that I'd like everybody to watch out for. I call this the donut effect. Maybe not the fanciest of terms, but that's what it reminds me of, is when emergency equipment utilizes the bell of the shower and to shoot that water down. It creates a pattern that almost surrounds the human body rather than focusing it down and evenly distributing it. So we utilize a nozzle, a centralized nozzle in our shower heads. We don't actually utilize our shower bell. The shower bell is really just to remind you that this is a shower, so it's more easily identifiable. But we shoot it out of the nozzle so that it distributes the water evenly across the victim. So watch out for that because it's really not as efficient as it should be. So for testing the shower and the flow rates, because this we're actually going to measure the amount of water coming out of the equipment. You're going to need that 5-gallon bucket with the 2-gallon water line marked. You're going to need the shower sock and pole, and you're going to need a thermometer. Toss the thermometer in the bottom of the bucket. You're going to place the shower sock around the shower head and into the bucket. Remember that there is, depending on the brand of equipment you're going to be using, some of us utilize flow controls and some of us don't. If you're going to get a Haas, you're not going to have a terribly hard time doing this. But some other brands, they pump out all the water. There's no flow restrictors. So hold that shower sock tightly around the shower head. Otherwise, you're going to get wet and you're going to be changing your shoes. So hold it around the shower head. Activate the shower for 6 seconds. Ensure that the eye wash or eye face wash is on during this process as well. So you have to have that activated because we're testing the requirements for the whole piece of equipment, not just the shower. So ensure the eye wash or eye face wash is on, and then check that the 2-gallon water level mark on the bucket is met. And that's ensuring that we are getting the correct GPM out of the equipment. We need 2 gallons in 6 seconds, right? That's how a nurse checks your pulse. That's how we check an emergency shower, right? 2 gallons in 6 seconds times 10, we have 20 gallons and we have 1 minute. And there you go. That's how you test the shower. But ensure that the other equipment is on if it's attached. For the shower flow pattern, this is pretty easy to measure. Just to give you a couple examples, you can see here on the right, we have 2 different shower flow patterns. The one on the left, again, kind of creating that donut effect that I described earlier. There's not much there in the center of the shower, but we have a nice wide flow pattern, which is compliant. And then on the right, a much more narrow flow pattern, which is non-compliant. So the shower has to provide a column of water that's 20 inches wide at 60 inches above the surface floor of the user. And that's average human shoulder spacing and height. That's all it's based on. The flow pattern also has to be clear of obstruction. So measure 16 inches from the center of the column because we need to fit into that column of water and that pattern. And sometimes the emergency equipment gets installed way too close to a wall, or there's piping that's running through the area and the shower head is too high and it cuts off some of the pattern. So we need to make sure that that's compliant. And here you go, good example. My buddy Bill, he's got the tape measure, measuring across the stream at 60 inches above the floor and ensuring that it's meeting that. So it's gonna cover your whole body is what we're ensuring. The shower head and the pull rod both have to be measured. So the shower head has to be between the outlet of water, more specifically, has to be between 82 to 96 inches above the surface floor of the user. And you have to use a tape measure to measure up to that nozzle. What they're ensuring is that if it's too low, the pattern's gonna be too narrow, it's not gonna wash you appropriately. And if it's too high, same thing, it's gonna be too wide and you're not gonna get enough water centered on your body. The pull rod also cannot exceed a maximum height of 69 inches from the floor. Just measure up to the very bottom of the pull rod to ensure that's the case. And we're just ensuring that the maximum amount of people can access that pull rod, right? And that's why it's a maximum height too. If it's too tall, the shorter amongst us can't reach the pull rod. But there's not a too low. Unless it actually hits the floor, then that would be a problem, but that would be really weird. But if it's really low, The taller amongst us can reach it, the lower or shorter amongst us can reach it. At any height you could reach that, but we want to make sure it doesn't get bumped up too high. Combination unit components need to be capable of operating simultaneously and shall be positioned so that the components may be used simultaneously by the same user. I don't know what it is. Sometimes the installer starts unpacking a combination unit and they're like, oh, okay, well, I got an eye wash, I got a shower. I'm gonna face the shower that way in case somebody needs to rinse their skin off. And I'm gonna face the eye wash this way in case somebody needs to rinse their eyes out. And that's not how it's designed to be used. You have to be able to utilize this equipment at the exact same time, just like on the right here, directly positioned over each other. So, and that you can easily approach a combination unit and tell that the shower is aligned with the eye wash or eye face wash. But this applies to that eye wash or eye face wash too. Ensure that the bullhorn or eye face wash head, etc., is aligned so that where you're going to stand, the eye wash streams are going to hit you in the eyes. You don't have to turn your body or make additional adjustments. So activate the eye wash and shower head together. Again, I suggest doing that earlier in the test when you test the shower GPM to ensure that you don't see any starvation in the eye wash or eye face wash when you activate the shower. It's one of the most dangerous non-compliance issues that we see in emergency equipment combination units is that the water wants to take the path of least resistance, and that's through the shower. The shower head is pumping out 20 plus GPM, the eye wash a lot less, and if you activate that shower, oftentimes it will starve the eye wash or the eye face wash, especially when there's no flow controls in place. So very important to be watching out for that. Ensure the showers is located directly above the eye wash or the eye face wash for simultaneous use. Incredibly important. If shut-off valves are installed in the supply line for maintenance purposes, you need to ensure that they are locked open. All shut-off valves have to be locked open, whether it's a lotto device or the valve itself is capable of being locked open. We need to ensure that the capability for an employee to just walk by and shut it off, or a maintenance member to leave it in the off position after some maintenance, isn't a possibility. Because now we have the potential for somebody to go to want to use it and there's no water to the unit, and that's very dangerous. So trace the supply line back as far as you can, check for shutoff valves, and if you don't have a locking valve in place, there's plenty of lotto devices, which I prefer. I think that adds a certain amount of responsibility on the maintenance user or et cetera team member to replace that lotto device after they're done. Holds them accountable, I think. Needs to deliver tepid flushing fluid. The tepid flushing fluid range is 60 degrees to 100 degrees Fahrenheit, or 16 degrees Celsius and 38 degrees Celsius for my buddies up north. 75% of ophthalmologists say that having that tepid water is very important and cite that it increases the chances that a victim is going to tolerate the 15-minute flush required. I don't know if you've experienced, your home shower is probably about 104 to 108 degrees Fahrenheit, which is like a pretty comfortable temperature. But above that, and you have the potential for scalding your skin, certainly you wouldn't look into 108 degree Fahrenheit water to rinse your eyes out. That could scald the sensitive tissue of your eyeballs. So we need to narrow in this range. Above 60 or below 60 degrees Fahrenheit, we have the potential for hypothermia. Above 100, eventually the potential for hyperthermia, heating up of the body too quickly. So we need to really be careful about dialing that range in. So you can conduct a test by, again, placing, earlier I mentioned, place the thermometer in the bottom of the 5-gallon bucket. Once you're done with that test, pull the thermometer out, check the temperature reading, and you're good to go. The issue is a lot of the times when you're testing emergency equipment, you're getting the warm water in the walls. But if you run it for a full 15 minutes or even a couple minutes, you're probably getting cold groundwater into the unit and you're gonna lose compliance. but we have to maintain tepid water throughout the flushing experience. So use a thermometer, test it. Even the laser, if you're going to use a laser, try to be careful about that and not measure like the plastic that you're pointing at, through the water, etc. So employees have to be trained in the location and proper use of emergency equipment and showers. There's a lot of manufacturers. Some of us do things differently. At Haas, we like to stick to a traditional push paddle and pull rod. That's not the case for everybody, and they have some interesting equipment. So ensure that the employees know how to use the equipment, and there's not a guessing game when they get to it. I call this the no duh clause. Just you need to ensure your employees know where this stuff is. Very important. Check the need for freeze protection. So if you have freezing temperatures at certain points of the year, you have to have freeze protected equipment in place. Once it freezes, obviously it's not going to activate, and it's going to create a pretty dangerous situation for your employees. So on the right, little tease here, we have our new Haas 8315 CTFP. This is what we use for extreme weather conditions, and this particular unit offers some enhanced Legionella protection and easy activation, easy return technology. Basically, we've really narrowed down the amount of space that we need to, or piping that we need to heat trace and protect. So you drop this in place, power it, it's going to protect from freezing, and you're going to get a full combination unit with our Axion technology available on it. In Appendix B5, basically the very end of the ANSI standard, they have some additional stuff in the appendices that allow us to do a couple different things. One of the most important is allow for a single step into an enclosure where the equipment can be accessed is not considered to be an obstruction. So I told you there's no changes in levels, no steps, etc. But they knew they had to make an exception to that rule for the type of equipment that you see here on the right. This is a booth type equipment that cannot be manufactured to be flush with the ground. It's a temperature controlled environment. So you either have chilling like AC or heating occurring in the booth to ensure that the victim has a comfortable environment to have their first aid emergency in. So it's either it's an extreme cold or extreme hot conditions. So it has to be a concealed unit. And we have to have that step available to step up and into the unit. So as long as it's into an enclosure, you can have one single step. One other thing to consider in the appendix in B5 is that a door does not constitute an obstruction if it meets the following requirements. It's non-locking, the doors open in the direction of the emergency equipment, the hazard is non-corrosive, and it has to be push bar or panic bar activated. So long as it meets those requirements, you can have a door. But the second it's corrosive or the door locks, it has a doorknob, etc., it is non-compliant. You have to change it up. Okay, poll question number 2. Nicole, if you would please.
All right. What are you likely to do after today's webinar? Check all that apply. Do not answer if the question does not apply to you directly. As you guys are answering these poll questions, I would like to just call out, I am getting so much great feedback on these questions. So just keep it coming. I'm trying to answer everything I can as best as I can, but as I have mentioned to those that have reached out, I will definitely defer a lot of these to Justin. I can tell you we won't be able to get to all of these today, but we will definitely make sure that we have these answers really laid out for you in the follow-up materials. So thank you for your active participation. It's great to see. So with that, I'll close this poll. Thanks, guys.
Positive feedback. I love positive feedback. That's my favorite kind of feedback. And with those questions, I'll try to pop those off and get those answered as quick as I can. If I don't get in trouble with Nicole, I'll go a little bit over. I might get yelled at. I might not. We'll see. But and I'll.
Yeah, Yeah, if you guys could, we do this every time, but if you guys can stay on for a few minutes past out the hour, we'll definitely be hammering out some questions, but I know we're not going to get through everything today, so.
Okay, cool. I know it really seems like I'm in charge here, but that is not the case. So recommended best practices, real quick. I'm gonna whip through this real fast, and then we got a couple things to go over, and then our Q&A. So equipment needs to be located in areas with adequate space for emergency responders. Remember that ultimately the goal after utilizing a shower and eye wash or eye face wash is getting them into a condition that's stable to transport them to a hospital, right? So we have to have space for the first responders to lay them out, carry them out, etc., or work on them on site. Also, locate other first aid equipment near the emergency shower or eye wash. If there's an emergency, you're likely going to need the other equipment nearby in the event of that emergency. So put them all in the same place, a first aid location. Make it a beacon of safety in your facility. Train employees how to access and activate that equipment during the emergency. I stated it earlier, but it's so important. I call it the no-duh clause, but people sometimes don't listen. So ensure that they know how to use the equipment. Quiz them. Walk up to an employee and tell me, hey, where's your nearest piece of emergency equipment? How do you turn it on? This is more of a bragging point. This is ANSI Z358.1. This is not one that a lot of people are familiar with, but this is hazard color coding. Red is actually emergency stop bar or button. Yellow is a tripping, falling, or striking hazard. Orange is parts of machinery or equipment that can cut, crush, or otherwise injure. And green, the color of a certain safety manufacturer whose webinar you are listening to currently, is the location of safety equipment. So green is the color coding for the ANSI standard that indicates the location of safety equipment. Also, if you're going to paint the area around the emergency equipment, which I see a lot, go with green. Green is safety. Remember the correct equipment for the hazard: eye wash, wood shavings, dust, airborne particulates. Eye face washes are minor incidents affecting only the eyes and face, but will cover everything that an eye wash would. A drench shower by itself is really just for PPE decontamination, right? You can't rinse your eyes out on this. And I don't know why you would prepare for a hazard that would affect your skin, but not affect your eyes at some point. Like, it's very likely your eyes are going to be affected by a hazard. And then the combination unit, perfect for any situation, chemical exposure of the eyes, face, body, and anything that an eye face wash or eye wash would cover. The ANSI tepid water range, 60 degrees to 100 degrees Fahrenheit. Remember that if the water's too hot or too cold, it can force the injured user out of the emergency equipment, and way too soon. If it's too cold, we risk cold shock, hypothermia, cardiac arrest, and the user to end that flushing before the time has passed. And they might not remove their clothing. You do have to be in your birthday suit in an emergency equipment, especially if you've been exposed to chemicals. So you need to remove your clothing. It's very important. And if it's too cold, it may not encourage them to do so, obviously. If it's too hot, you risk Legionella growing in the pipes. Legionella thrives between 95 to 115 degrees Fahrenheit. And while the ANSI standard does require a weekly flush to clear all piping sections that lead to emergency shower and eye wash station, avoiding those temperatures that harbor the bacteria is valuable in limiting potential exposure to those, which could make a bad situation even worse. This is something I was looking forward to. Look at that beautiful piece of equipment. That is on the way. So this is coming soon. This is our Haas integrated tepid water solutions. We've done a lot of improvements. This is the most advanced tepid water solutions and services in the industry. We've been doing this for a long time, and we have a makeover coming. This is only from our Haas integrated team. We're offering more streamlined manufacturing and enhanced craftsmanship. industry leading lead times too to get this product from manufacturing floor to your facility. Full range of flexible and scalable solutions to meet any environment's needs, hot, cold, extreme, etc. And then we're now offering a safe site series options to ensure victim accessibility, right? Realistically, that emergency equipment, we want this to be a beacon of safety inside of your facility, right? And it's got to be as highly visible as possible. So those green doors that you're seeing there and the light, those are actually like light up doors for high visibility on your site, which is really, really cool. So they can easily spot the doors, easily get to the equipment, and easily spot that beacon of safety inside of your facility. So more on this coming soon. I've got a poll question here next to talk about this. If you do want more information from us and more communication from us regarding this, this is coming very soon. So Nicole, if you would launch that, please.
Yeah, I'm gonna give a marketing plug here too as well. But first, the question is, would you be interested in learning more about the Haas integrated tepid water product launch? We are really going to be pushing out some significant training and materials for this launch to support out in the market. So definitely keep your eye out. This is really really innovative offering that we are going to be bringing out to the tepid water space, and our team has really been working on the customer experience and really just the product integrity. So we're really excited about it. So let us know if you're interested in learning more, but do keep an eye out for updated materials and information to come your way. And I'll go ahead and close this out.
Haas Integrated is amazing. I mean, the type of situations that we can find the right puzzle piece for you in your facility is pretty incredible. From your normal conditions, certainly if you're taking victim comfort into mind, to hot or cold environments, oil rigs that are offshore to middle of the desert, doesn't matter. We can find a solution for you. Some additional best practices: take your contacts out, very important. They'll trap contaminants. Don't touch your eyes. Disrobe completely, including your socks and shoes. I don't suggest that you start disrobing before you get to the emergency equipment though. It could cause a potential tripping hazard, obviously. But once you get to that equipment, remove everything, especially your socks and shoes. All the contaminants will run down and they will get trapped in your socks and shoes and cause an even worse situation. Add privacy curtains. This is possibly one of the worst days of your life. Keeping a little bit of modesty would be nice. Bump test before high risk tasks. So if you're doing something particularly dangerous, test it off on just to ensure that it's working before you go forward. Be cautious while assisting, not to contaminate yourself. Verbally yell at your coworkers if you have to. Ensure the signage in use is the correct type of signage. Very important. Oh, and my little program here. So we're almost to the Q&A here. This is our ANSI emergency shower and eyewash survey program. So I have representatives, we have representatives, I should say, all across the US, Canada, that are trained in the ANSI standard and how to test for the ANSI standard and its requirements by yours truly. And what this program offers is insight into your own compliance in your facility. So it's a full day of inspection, free. And what we're going to provide you is an inspection report that gives you a download of every piece of emergency piece of equipment in your facility measured against the ANSI standard. We'll give you an executive summary chart like you see here on the right, basically a pie chart. This is based on our evaluation of over 1,000 pieces of emergency equipment. Overwhelmingly, you have about a 1 in 5 chance that a piece of emergency equipment is going to work correctly. If you can imagine rolling the dice like that and how awful those odds are. And it's usually for a performance related issue. So the shower's not working correctly, or the eye wash or eye face wash isn't working correctly. Very dangerous. Only about 12% of equipment was fully compliant. The other 10%, it's missing a sign, missing dust cover, things like that. We'll provide you with recommendations on how to fix those things, a debriefing meeting to cover all of our findings with you. And there are some restrictions, but it's basically like distance and how many days it might take for us to be on site and things like that. So get a hold of us. Our website is www.hosco.com. Use a /survey on there to get to the survey program. And if you fill out the form, you'll get directly in contact with me. We can have a conversation about somebody visiting your site and helping you with your compliance. So that brings us to poll question number 4, Nicole.
All right, so would you be interested in a free site survey of your existing emergency equipment for ANSI compliance? I've had a few questions actually throughout the presentation asking if we offer this service. So I've captured you through the Q&A, but please, if you are interested, definitely note it here and we'll have somebody get in contact with you. Okay, I'll give you just a couple more seconds here. We have just a few more slides to get through, so if you guys can hang on, we definitely appreciate your time and attendance here. So I'm going to go ahead and close this out.
Yeah, sorry about that. I get so passionate about this stuff, and this is our most popular webinar, and we really constantly get feedback that you guys are walking away with the right stuff, and we want to make sure you get everything you need. So sometimes we go over. Dang it.
All right, go ahead, Justin. Oh, just kidding. This is my portion. Okay, so talking about HOS services, so when Justin has been going through all of this information, it's really important that we focus on a service that we provide that I think really differentiates us from the market. So whether you're adhering to OSHA compliance or Joint Commission status, or really just trying to achieve a general safety first environment, HOS Services is a program that we offer to really help you achieve that ANSI Z358.1 compliance in any environment. We are the only manufacturer who provide a warranty and field service for emergency shower and eye wash products. And this is a service that we provide regardless of which brand you have installed at your facility. We really have a comprehensive offering that provides in-depth on-site evaluation and really just helps you achieve that compliance. By partnering with HOS Services, you receive support that is unmatched with work that's done by HOS certified technical experts. Again, we, regardless of the brand, really make sure that your facility is compliant. We also provide assurance that your equipment will be properly tested weekly and annually, making sure that you free up your maintenance team to focus on day-to-day operations. This is just a quick list of things that we do provide: weekly, annual inspections, preventative maintenance and contracts, repairs and upgrades, startup and commissioning. We talked about the HOS integrated tepid water solutions. This is really a nice supplemental program that we offer. We also offer training, online competent person training and certifications, and warranty service. So we really want to make sure that we're not just providing you with superior products in the market, but we also want to make sure that we're complementing those products with the service that we can provide year round. All right, and I think, Justin, if you want to advance the slide, that leads us into our last poll question. As you can imagine, it's related to HOS services. So based on everything that we've discussed today and the overview that we've given on HOS services, would you be interested in learning more about how HOS services can help you achieve ANSI compliance? All right. I am going to give y'all just a few more seconds here. Again, lots of great feedback. I admittedly, I wasn't able to get to all of the questions, but just know that you will get these, not only the questions, but Justin's answers and outline in the follow-up materials. So I'm going to go ahead and close this poll and send it back over to you, Justin.
Okay, and speaking of which, with the questions and answers, I had this FAQ that I like to go over. We get these most frequently. I'll give the question and answer for every single one of these in the Excel spreadsheet, right? We don't need to go over this right now. I'll give you all those answers. You can save them. You'll have them in the Excel. We'll go straight to the questions, the Q&A, Nicole, especially with the submitted ones, if you want to start with those.
Yeah, so we tried something a little different this time around. So when you registered for the webinar, we asked if you had any questions that you'd like to submit ahead of time. So we got a couple, and I will go ahead and start with those, and then we'll dip into a few of the questions that we got throughout the presentation. First question is the audible and flashing lights required for high school lab safety shower and eyewash stations?
Oh, alarms. Alarms in general are not required via the ANSI standard. Typically, if we go into a facility and we see lights and alarms, it's the sign of a very healthy safety environment. Above and beyond has been provided to help protect the employees and give alarm to other employees if there was an incident or situation, especially on larger sites where people are spread out, they're all doing their own thing, and quick attention needs to be provided to an emergency in a certain part of a facility. So they're not required, but they are highly recommended.
Great, okay. Second, when testing the discharge of tempered water, what tool or instrument or meter do you recommend for verifying water temperature, and what test procedure should be used?
Just your basic thermometer can be used, especially when testing the shower, or even if you just have an eye wash or an eye face wash, you can throw that thermometer right in the stream of the eye wash to test it. Or if it's draining, catch some in the bucket and toss it in there. But your basic thermometer, pool thermometer, whatever it happens to be, I like to use the floating one because I don't want to dig my arm all the way down to the bottom of a bucket. I accidentally dropped I was on top of a cooling tower at a facility one time, and I dumped my bucket over the side because they just said it could go anywhere, and I accidentally dumped my thermometer off the side, which sucked. But so I like the floating ones because you can grab it real quick and test it. But also a laser thermometer is perfectly fine. I would highly suggest just utilizing our 9011 test kit. It's really handy. You have everything that you need in there to fully conduct an ANSI compliance test. But we'll be sending this out earlier. We had that list of tools earlier in the slides. You need all of that for a full compliance test. But for the temperature, just your pool thermometer or a thermometer is perfectly fine.
Great. And in regards to the ANSI updates, can you give us any feedback on have you heard of any updates that you feel will be on the, or excuse me, any items that you feel will be on the 2020 update, or when you anticipate a new update coming?
Oh, yeah, sure. So probably within the next year or two. It depends on industry trends, changes in emergency equipment, and our safety environment. So it's hard to predict. If you look at the ANSI Z358.1 standard, it's like page 2 or 3. Haas is right on there, our name, as well as one or two other manufacturers and a bunch of other companies. But Haas sits on the board. So we very frequently have news, not stuff that we can really share, but I assume a change is coming soon. Some of the changes that I kind of would guess, just over the years being so close to this, would be a change in the tepid water range, especially dropping the high side, the 100 degrees to maybe 95 degrees to help prevent Legionella, and upgrading to an eye face wash gauge and more requirements around providing eye face washes or eye face wash technology and things like that. I would assume those would be some of the bigger changes.
Great. So this is a California specific question.
Yay.
What's that?
Yay.
But we get this question a lot, so I feel it's worth pointing out.
Okay.
In California, they reference an outdated ANSI standard and only require monthly activation.
True.
Have you found the current ANSI standard cited in California? So I think where this question is going, weekly versus monthly, right?
Right.
So
And
can you speak to that a little bit?
yeah, that drives me crazy. It's one of my biggest pet peeves in California right now. With how on top of things California usually is, and especially with innovation and moving the needle forward on certain safety standards and things like that, you really think they would be referring to the 2014 standard, because there's no grandfather clause in the ANSI standard. The current version is what we have to adhere to according to OSHA, but Cal OSHA, for whatever reason, refuses to update it, and it's probably because they've got so much going on, and they have a lot of standards that they have to update and adhere to. I assume they'll get to the ANSI standard eventually. Watch, we'll have the 2021 ANSI update, and they'll finally start referring to 2014. I highly suggest you doing weekly testing. Monthly testing allows for growth in Legionella in the pipes. That's the biggest issue when it comes to the weekly testing. We have to clean those pipes out. So, but it's one of my biggest pet peeves. It drives me crazy. I've reached out to their representatives myself, and to little avail. So hopefully they update that soon.
Okay, great. So this is in regards to the distance of the emergency equipment. So is the 55 feet rule an ANSI requirement, or is that an approximation based on the 10-second requirement?
Both, kind of. So that it was originally 10 seconds, but 10 seconds is different for all of us. I'm not the athlete I used to be, especially after quarantine. So we can all move a bit, faster or slower based on our build and our age and things like that. So 10 seconds was hard to gauge. So they finally gave us in the appendix to the ANSI standard, the 55 feet, a solid measurable distance. I don't know why they didn't take out the 10 seconds rule and just substitute it for the 55, but they included it on top of it. So just utilize the maximum 55 feet. That's what I always suggest. Don't pay attention to the 10 seconds. I think that's silly.
Okay. And then I'll just touch on a couple more because we still have a good number of people on the call, but is there a guideline on time needed to flush the eyes? Example, 5 minutes for non-irritants or mild irritants, 15 to 20 minutes for moderate to severe irritants and chemicals that cause acute toxicity if absorbed through the skin. And it goes on 30 minutes for most corrosives and 60 minutes. So can you just talk about basically the flushing time requirements?
Yeah, that is all determined by a single source, and that's the safety data sheet, so the SDS sheet. In any case or any situation, first refer to the SDS sheet, and you'll, under the first aid section, it will tell you whether or not you need an eye wash, or you need an eye face wash, or you need a shower, and tell you how long you need to be utilizing that equipment to fully flush out that what you've gotten in your eyes or on your skin. If it's a substance that doesn't have an SDS, like there's no SDS for like dirt, but if you got dirt in your eyes, I would still suggest 15 minutes, basically. I mean, we're talking about your vision, something that would be life altering if it were actually damaged. and we really need to make sure it's all the way out of there. So I always stick with 15 minutes as a bare minimum. But check that SDS sheet.
Okay, so I got a few questions that are very similar, so I'm going to try and summarize here, but it's in regards to units that maybe don't have a drain and the testing. So how do you accommodate a full 15-minute flush where there is not a drain? And how do you do that? I mean, a bucket obviously isn't going to suffice for these types of tests. What is your recommendation for this?
It would take a lot of buckets. So what I would suggest is, because drains are not touched on in the ANSI standard, that's local plumbing code, etc. And that can change wildly from state to state. So what I would highly suggest is there are tanks out there that can capture that kind of water, that utilizes like a hose and a funnel. You can attach it to the shower head and let it rip and then take it outside. If you're in a really sensitive area, what I would highly suggest, and it's just not in the cards for you to run a shower for 15 minutes, not, you know, let alone like damaging sensitive equipment nearby, drywall is not very water friendly, etc. Find a piece of equipment that is attached to that same exact line. An adjacent piece of emergency equipment that is up the supply line, etc., and run that one for 15 minutes. Then you can determine it's connected to the same exact supply line, and the likelihood that the initial piece of equipment can also flush for a full 15 minutes is highly likely. So that's what I would suggest, and a way for you to get around that and to test that equipment without testing that equipment. Otherwise, they're kind of rare, but that equipment does exist where you can capture it, you can get a tank or funnel it to a nearby drain and things like that.
Great. Okay, I'm going to go ahead because we're about 17 minutes over. I'm going to just ask this last question and then we can go ahead and shut it down here. And this is in regards to labs. Labs often have single eyewash, but it is handheld. Is this compliant?
It is not. Emergency equipment has to be completely hands-free. There are drench hoses that have Eyewash or eye face wash attachments. So it'll have that head on the end of the device. But it has to be fully mounted on the countertop or into or onto the wall. There's lots of different mounting devices for these. And it has to lock on and stay on indefinitely for it to be compliant. So you have to be able to take your hands off of it and it run indefinitely for it to be compliant. And it can be a compliant eye wash or eye face wash, but the second you grab the device and you have to maneuver it or hold it open or take it off of the counter, it's non-compliant as an eye wash or eye face wash. It's just a drench hose at that point. So it depends on the situation, but very frequently drench hoses double as each type of equipment, but they have to have the right mounting device.
Great. You know, again, like I said, everybody who submitted a question, thank you so much. There was so much engagement in this webinar. I did not get to touch on everything, but we will be in touch and follow up with the question and answers. And if anybody reached out and asked for somebody to follow up with them, we will definitely make sure that we do have a follow up with you after this. And with that, Justin, I'll hand it over to you for last comments and wrap this up.
And I just wanted to say, I have my attendees view here, and we had such a huge amount of people stick around for the Q&A. So I hope this was useful for you. I'm sorry I went over. I always get so carried away with this stuff. It's really important. I hope you got what it is that you needed. You'll get lots of useful follow-up stuff from us that you can utilize and pass forward. And I really hope you take this knowledge that you've gotten today and go forth and be champions for, you know, emergency equipment compliance. So my information is there. Please reach out to us. Utilize our website. Use our live chat feature on our website. It's very handy. Go straight to our top-notch customer service team, and let us know if you need anything at all. Thank you for your time, and have a great rest of your week. Bye, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.